Let's go down to regional Australia. Tensions are mounting between the government and farmers as the push comes to scar some of the nation's best agricultural land with thousands and thousands of kilometres of transmission lines for so-called green energy projects. Joining me to discuss this now, former Deputy PM, member for New England Barnaby Joyce, and Dungowan farmer Jacqui Gidley-Baird. Jacqui and Barnaby, welcome to the program. My understanding that these transmission towers, the actual towers on which the lines will run, are about as high as the Sydney Harbour Bridge pylons. They'll have a 1 kilometre exclusion zone around it where farmers like you, Jacqui, can't farm. There's obviously a bushfire risk because the RFS says you can't fight any fires within 500 metres of a power line. And then there's all the impact of land clearing on native animals and fauna and flora, etc. Jacqui, you've got a cattle property. You run cattle. I'm told you're just southeast of Tamworth. What will these lines do to your farm?
Evening, Peter. There's so many bad effects that will happen to our farm and our ability to operate. So we have a farm that sort of has irrigated river flats, then sort of rich, fertile cattle country in the middle, and then sort of higher native timber. There's so many things that we won't be able to do if these transmission lines go through. We won't be able to cultivate our irrigated land because any dust is deemed unacceptable in the area of the transmission lines. We can't fence near it and do controlled grazing with our cattle because of the risk of arcing and fire. We do actually have an endangered koala population in our back hills in that timbered country, and that's not being considered. That seems to be acceptable to clear. We've also got some big risks to our house as far as our ability to fight fires once these huge towers are in. So it virtually changes the whole way that we can produce our beef. And there's also some big detriments to our cattle as far as animal health grazing under these transmission lines.
So, Barnaby, there's about 10 things there that Jacqui's just rattled off that makes this seem a huge impost on farmers and basically making her land less valuable, her business operation less productive. Definitely. If you listen to the government, it's just a case of putting up these pylons. You can still run your sheep and cattle underneath. There's no other risk. Native animals are all okay. Jacqui's saying, well, that's just rubbish, isn't she?
Well, it is rubbish, and what we'll see, obviously, is you get an arc out. If you get dust or smoke, you have the potential for the electricity to arc out to the ground, incredibly dangerous. And we're seeing pushback on this that goes from Ravenshoe in far north Queensland to the Wimmera in Victoria and everywhere in between. It's actually absolute statement of socialism. They just come in and say, well, this is negotiation, and if you don't like it, we're just going to compulsorily acquire a corridor through the middle of your place. Now, if I was to say to your listeners, look, we're going to run an extension cord through your house. You can talk to us whether you want it in front of the fridge or in front of the dishwasher, and then it's going to go through the lounge room and out through the window in the bathroom. And if you don't agree with it, we're just going to compulsory acquire some of that house and you live with it forevermore. I mean, that's socialism. This is a ridiculous concept, forced on people for a product, this power, intermittent power, where the price goes through the roof, the reliability goes through the floor, and the money goes overseas. And some people should start finding these overseas companies that ultimately will be the beneficiary of this, and find the very rich people residing in Singapore or China or Europe and say, well, they're the beneficiaries, we're the suckers, and the lady in Rooty Hills who can't afford a power bill, she's a victim.
I'll come back to that point about the foreign investment because I think that's critical, Barnaby. But Jacqui, I want to know what sort of consultation you've had. Has there been public meetings? Has government gone out there and consulted with you? How did you first hear about their plans to crisscross your land?
Peter, it's terrifying how we found out. So we actually found out through Facebook. My husband was looking at a post from a friend who is in some of the country for the wind turbines, and they were saying how bad the community consultation was for that project, and was linking through to communications for the transmission lines. It was only through zooming in on this map that my husband saw it actually transected straight up the middle of our farm. And the communication from Energy Co, which is the New South Wales government department who's supposed to be supporting farmers through this process, the communication hasn't got any better. So I've had them out to farm to try and explain to me what was happening. They told me it was actually only one of these mega towers going through the property, but actually there's two running in parallel. They told me that this would be a slow and consultative process, but I've also found out that they intend to start signing contracts in January 2024 and actually be shovels in the ground for 2025. So realistically, they're using the legislation to push this through as quickly as possible. They've also had a community consultation meeting in my community, and we all found, as a bush community, we learnt more off the neighbours than we did with Energy Co. What their process was virtually to try and divide and conquer us. They had maps on the table, they had glossy brochures, which when you read them didn't actually contain much information, and they had one-on-one conversations. There wasn't any clear communication of this is the expected timelines, this is what as an affected landholder you should expect, this is sort of the outcome as far as. So my husband and I bought our farm as a bare block held together with baling twine. We've invested every dollar that we had to improve the pastures, to improve the infrastructure and to build a house for our family. All that value is being taken away from them and from us, and they cannot communicate to us how they're going to in any way replace what is supposed to be the future for our children. It's every time I send information and try and get more, I get a lot of glossy community consultation and lots of buzzwords, but I'm not getting any facts and any sort of understanding, which unfortunately creates more stress. And our community's been through enough.
Oh, absolutely, Jacqui.
Fires and droughts, yeah, we don't need this.
And what's happening to you, it's happening to others that have got these large-scale solar farms coming in. I've spoken to a lot of people about wind farms. We know all that kit is made and manufactured, creating jobs in China, and they're not built here in Australia. And Barnaby's point before, that the profits from these energy companies, some of these big players, is headed offshore. It's not even reinvested in Australia. So Barnaby, I know you're involved in a fight back for these farmers, as you say, from Queensland all the way down to Victoria. What can you do?
Well, we've started a process and we've had a great response. We've had our first meeting. We'll have our next meeting where we'll select a chair for that group. It's a group that involves people from North Queensland to Victoria. We're going to widen this out because what they do, and Jacqui pointed out so well, is they'll get everybody to jump up and down the Dungowan Hall and, you know, they'll have them looking at this glossy and that glossy and they'll tell them everything's beautiful and going to get better. And then they'll go up to Walker and do the same. Then they'll go up to Ravenshoe in Queensland and do the same. And then when they go to knock the top off a hill near Mackay and put wind towers in there, they'll go up there and tell them the same. Then they'll duck down to Wimmera and get them all to jump up and down the hall in the Wimmera. And then they'll go down to Merriwa and the Upper Hunter. But they never want them all to get together. They don't like that idea. So my plan is to get all these people together and to get them down to the front lawn of Canberra. And we might just take a fair few people from the western suburbs of Sydney and say, are you happy with your power bill, folks? Are you happy with it? Come join us. Let's deal with this cost of living disgrace and this absolute imposition, this socialist imposition on the private assets of Australians.
I tell you, Jacqui, you've got to be the spokeswoman out there on this issue. I know you've got a lot on your plate, but you're brilliant. That was such a good summary tonight. You've got a permanent spot on this program any time you want it to bang the drum, because I suspect there's a lot of my viewers at home who are as angry as you are about what's happening to you. Barnaby Joyce, Jacqui Gidley-Baird, thank you for your time.